Hey everybody, welcome to the Man of Leek. I'm John as always, and pre-release is almost here. Some of you might be doing it tonight, otherwise tomorrow night, Saturday, Sunday, but soon you're going to be playing Theros if you're not already playing it on Arena or MTGO. So I thought I'd throw together a video today of 10 of the worst cards in the set. 10 cards you should never, ever be putting in your draft or sealed decks. Now, before you get mad, some of these might have constructed playability, but we are talking limited, of course, since we are a limited focus channel. Up first is Sweet Oblivion. Sweet Oblivion's 2 mana to mill 4 cards from somebody's library. Could be your opponent's, could be you. This is the card that I probably have the most possibility of being wrong on. If a mill deck does exist in limited, as in a mill deck that mills my opponent out, this card will obviously have a place. But since this card's uncommon, since there's very little common support, and since many players will have escape spells, milling your opponent is a very, very, very bad idea. In limited, mill does literally nothing until it does something, which is winning the game. And 1 card milling 4 cards is not enough. Escaping this is just really expensive. This card just should not be in your deck if your plan is to target your opponent. There's a possibility that you might want to target yourself to get the escape going, but there are creatures that you mill yourself. There are better ways of milling yourself that have more attached to it, whereas this card has nothing attached to it. So don't put this card in your deck. Number 10, Sweet Oblivion. Next up at number 9 is Nyxborn Brute. This one's pretty simple. It's just a 5 mana vanilla 7/3. That's it. It is an enchantment creature, so it could trigger Constellation, but there's not much of that in red. Possibly none, if I remember correctly. Devotion's not really that big of a thing in red either, and a 7/3 dies to an awful lot of things, including some 2-drops in the format. You don't want to be putting 5 mana into a creature that can die to 2-drops. It's just not a good thing. Yes, 7 is big, but 3 is so tiny. This will only win you games that you were already going to win anyways. It should never, ever, ever make your deck. Up next is Fruit of Tisza at number 8. Fruit of Tisza is a single mana to make a player lose 2 life. It could actually be you, because it's not target opponent. I can't think of any reason why you would in this limited format, but you could. Typically, you're going to be targeting your opponent, and that's it. You're going to deal 2 damage. You're not going to kill a creature. You're not going to kill them unless they're at 2 life. It's just not versatile enough. It's a card that, much like Mill, does nothing. Dealing damage to your opponent does nothing until you kill them. Now, since this can be recurred, there is some potential to do 4 damage, maybe 6 damage, but that's an awful lot of cards to be using for escape, whereas you could have tons of other cards that are significantly better to escape with. The Typhon, or any of the rares, or many other uncommons. Any creature being escaped would be better than Fruit of Tisza here. This card just doesn't do enough, and it's definitely a new player trap. These cards, we've seen them before, they're always a new player trap. New players will say, hey, it's super cheap and I get to do 2 damage. That's 2. That's 10% of their life total. That's not actually good enough. So don't play Fruit of Tisza. Next up at number 7 is a card that people are going to be playing a lot of. Just not in limited, I hope. Exclu Ancient. Exclu Ancient is 4 green, green, green for a 5/5 trample. That's really hard to cast because of the green, 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 and because of how expensive it is, and it's really low power and toughness for what you're paying. Now, you do get to triple all of your mana from there on out, but in limited, most games end on turn 6, 7, 8, 9. It's relatively rare for games to go longer than 9. They do, but it's relatively rare. As well, you're typically just curving out in limited. You're not going to be left with too many cards in your hand when you do finally play this, so the fact that you have 21 mana doesn't matter when you're just picking up 1 card a turn. You know, even if you get that 21 mana and you get to play the 3 remaining cards in your turn, that's going to be a pretty good turn, but you're still just going to be playing 1 card a turn that you could have played if you had 7 mana or 21 mana. So the problem here is that it's just so overcosted for what it is. It does not win the game. It will have an impact. A 5/5 trample is pretty darn good, but your 7-drops need to be ending the game very, very soon. And this one's just not doing that. So in limited, you should probably never be playing this card. There may be some value attached to this card, so you might be picking it for value, but you shouldn't be playing it. Up next at number 6 is Rumbling Sentry. Rumbling Sentry is 5 mana for a 3/6. It's not quite vanilla. It scries 1 when it comes in, which does not make it worthwhile. The white decks in this format are typically aggro, or they are auras. Those auras probably want to go on things that are relatively cheap. There is some vaguely control-y white stuff if you're going white-black or white-blue, but neither of those want a 3/6 as their 5-drop. They have black removal and they have white removal. They don't need a 3/6. It doesn't do anything. This would function much better if it was like an 0/5 for 2, like the turtle in blue. Yeah, this card just doesn't do enough. It's not a relevant creature type. Scrying 1 is nice, but not enough to make this card playable. Rumbling Sentry should be the last pick in many packs, and you should never put it in your deck. Up next at number 5 is Underworld Breach. Again, a card that probably has some constructed playability, but not limited playability. It's 1 in a red for an enchantment that lets you escape any card you want from your graveyard, with the escape cost being at CMC plus 3 cards, which is pretty cheap. That's about as cheap as you get to escape cards. There's a couple of 2s, but most are in the 3 or above range. You're typically not going to be escaping multiple cards with this, because at that point we're talking 6 cards and, 2 cards worth of mana costs, and you've already spent 2 mana on this. It's just not doing enough. As well, you have to stop thinking about the best case scenario. You have to stop thinking, I have my bomb and I play my bomb and my opponent kills it, and then I have this card in hand after that and I play it and I'm able to replay the bomb. That's great. The card's awesome in that specific situation. But what you always have to think about a game of Magic is that there are so many different branching points. What if you don't draw your bomb? This is bringing back a bear or some random little card, or possibly nothing. What if your opponent doesn't kill your bomb? Well, it doesn't matter too much because your bomb's still alive, but this card could have been a creature. It could have been aura to go on your bomb. It could have been a removal spell to get your bomb through better. Instead, it's not doing anything. What if they kill your bomb and you never draw this? There's so many little things that go into a game of Magic that stop you from getting to that best case scenario, which is why I typically never think about that best case scenario, because it doesn't matter. It's like winning the lottery. I don't plan my budget around winning $1 million tomorrow night. So Underworld Breach, because it's so variable, because you never know what you're going to be getting back until you are in that moment in time, it's just not a card that you should put in. In Limited, you're playing against variants of what was in your draft pools, variants of what's being passed to you, variants of top decking. Why put cards in your deck that aren't going to consistently do the same thing over and over? So don't put Underworld Breach in your Limited decks. Save it for your Standard, your Modern, your Pioneer. There's maybe some stuff that could work there. Limited, Up next at number 4 is Allure of the Unknown. Allure of the Unknown is 5 mana to look at the top 6 cards in your library and then show your opponent and give them one of them. Spoiler, they're going to choose the best. Then you get to draw the other 5 and they get to keep that one and cast it for free. Now, people who are probably, a few steps above new players have heard about card advantage, and this card draws me 5 cards for 5 mana. That's really good. But what they'll miss out on is the resource discrepancy that happens here. You pay a card and you pay 5 mana to give your opponent the best card in the top 6 of your library for free. You then get the worst 5 cards in the top 6 cards of your library, which will be a number of lands. Statistically, there's going to be, I believe, at least 1 land or 2 is going to be the average. And your opponent's taken the best card, which means we're left with 2 cards. We're left with 2 cards that we're actually interested in. And again, much like Underworld Breach, it's really random as to what's going to happen here. This card's not going to do the same thing game in, game out. Sometimes this is going to draw the 6 best cards off the top of your deck. Your opponent's going to take the best of the 6 best, and you're going to get the other 5 best cards in your deck. But again, most of the time, you are not. So this card is, again, a card that you just should not put in. It's not going to do enough. It's going to do things really randomly, and it gives your opponent stuff for free. And giving your opponent stuff for free is one of the worst things you can do in Limited Magic. Up next at number 3 is Enigmatic Incarnation, which has art by Pindersky, which is a local artist here in London, Ontario. So I kind of like it, but the card itself, unfortunately, is just not designed for limited. We've seen this effect a number of times, Birthing Pod being one of the originals. And of course, recently we had Neoform and we had Vanifar, and they just never really work out in limited. Again, like the last 2 cards we talked about, because they don't always do the same thing. Yes, if you have a 4-drop enchantment and you have a 5-drop bomb and you play this and you play your 4-drop enchantment and you sack that and you get your 5-drop bomb, you did it. But what happens if you play this and don't draw that enchantment? What happens if you draw that enchantment and then draw your bomb and you don't have a chance to use this? There's so many steps to go through to actually make this work out that it's just not reliable enough to put in your deck. Not only that, but if you're playing in paper or on MTGO and you didn't screenshot your deck, you have to remember exactly what's in your deck, and that's pretty darn hard to do. So there's just too many hoops to jump through here. There's too much memorization of your deck that has to be done. And it's one of those cards that just gets completely undone by you drawing things not in the perfect singular correct order. So again, Enigmatic Incarnation should not make your deck. Up next at number 2, we're going to get away from cards that do random things, and we're going to get to a card that does the same thing every time, poorly, Unknown Shores. Unknown Shores is a land that taps for a colorless mana, or you can pay 1 and tap it, and that's key, to turn that color of mana into a different color of mana. People will frequently play this to splash a card. They'll be blue-black and they have a card or 2, or hopefully not more. We've talked about that in the set review, and they want to splash it, so they put in Unknown Shores because they think, I pay a green and I make a black. But the very important thing to know about Unknown Shores is you don't pay a green and make a black. You pay a green and you pay a colorless mana because you have to tap this land. And this land could have tapped for a mana, for a colorless mana. You pay 2 mana to make 1 mana. And so you're actually down on mana. You can't play your 4-drop splash card on curve because you only have 3 mana available when you have 3 lands in this and need to make a different color. So Unknown Shores is very, 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 very bad in your deck. Your deck will be worse off if you play this. Not only because it costs mana to splash, but because you might be a green-white deck, draw your hand, have a few white cards in there, a forest, and an Unknown Shores. This is not a color of mana in your deck. This is colorless. And so it can really hurt your early game. It's going to make hands that you have to mulligan. It just hurts your deck so much. You are far better off simply putting in the basic lands of the color that you need to splash than playing this card. So don't play Unknown Shores. If you're going to splash, preferably be green so that you have access to Caryatid and the various ways of searching up lands like Omen of the Hunt, or use the Altar of the Pantheon, or much more preferably, the Traveler's Amulet. But don't use Unknown Shores. The final card for today is another land, Field of Ruin. Field of Ruin is one of the worst cards you could ever put in your limited deck because it simply does nothing. It is 100% a plant for constructed for standard specifically, since it is a reprint. The non-basic lands in this format are the Temples, which there's next to no reason to hit, Unknown Shores, which nobody should be playing, and Library of Scophos, which could be mildly annoying, but not annoying enough for you to hurt your mana base by putting this in. Much like Unknown Shores, if you put this in your deck, or in the early game, it's really going to hurt your curve if you're off a color, because this is not going to help either of your colors. So Field of Ruin is absolutely not a card in limited. You should never put it in. It's probably flat out the worst card in the set for limited. So that's going to wrap it up for my top 10 cards that you should never put in your deck in draft or in sealed. Let me know if I missed any. Let me know if you disagree with any of these. Do you think that Nyxbloom Ancient is worth all of that mana? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me over on Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. You can find me at patreon.com/themanaleak if you want to become a backer there and help out. Earn your way towards getting a Mana Leak playmat, get in the draws each week to get the Pack 1 Pick 1 cards, etc. You can go to inkedgaming.com/themanaleak. That'll let them know that I sent you if you're going to go buy a playmat or dice bag or anything like that. They do have great products over there. I've been using them for many years since I started buying playmats, actually. And of course, the easiest way to help out is to like, share, and subscribe. If you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, though, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all next time.